What's going on, guys? This is Jaydee here, and this is episode 49 of the WrestleBread podcast. I hope everyone is doing well these past couple of weeks as the coronavirus has spread very rapidly in America. Here in Philly, it's up to, as of today, which is March 24th, it's up to 382 cases, and we just had our first death in the city. Right next door to us, New Jersey is up to 3,000 cases, and I think they're at like 44 people who died. New York is really bad, and it's a scary situation. It's scary for me because I work, like I said in the last episode, I work for a bank, which is considered essential, and so we're open pretty much full hours, except for we're restricting the type of services that we offer. And the scary thing is I work downtown in Philly, and we are now under a stay-at-home order that has taken place this past Monday at 8 a.m. And the order was for people to stay in their house pretty much and to only go outside to get food, to go to work, or any important, things you needed to do. They promoted, you can go outside and run and stuff, but practice social distancing was the biggest thing, with the hopes that it wouldn't get really bad in Philly and that we will be able to get rid of this virus or slow it down in Philly within the 2 weeks. So this week 2, since they closed down the businesses, non-essential businesses, and this is day 2 of the stay-at-home order. And I can tell you that it's not happening. There are people who are out and about like nothing is going on. There are people who are not practicing the social distancing. Me, myself, with working at a bank, I have to tell people to stay back, separate from 6 feet. I'm wearing gloves. Not really a mask just yet because they were trying to keep the mask for, the healthcare workers and everything because there is a massive shortage. So I'm working without a mask, dealing with people, and it's just people not understanding that they should really just stay at home and not come out. Really. I understand that, it can get boring. I can see if it's like nothing is serious, but this is a disease that can get you sick, but can also get people that you love sick and potentially kill them. And I have people who have, acute asthma or have respiratory, I can't think of the word. I'm sorry. But basically respiratory problems. Whereas though, if they were to get the corona, that would be it. And it's scary because I don't want to contract it. I'm one of those people. Now, I don't know how my body would react to it, but normally when it comes to sicknesses, I normally carry it well. Whereas though it doesn't really knock me out, but it's scary because there are people out here who are not showing any symptoms and they have it. And it's very difficult to tell then at that point if you truly have the sickness or not. The thing that's pissing me off, really, is that people just don't care. And they said that the numbers have increased in people who are between the ages of 20 and 39. And as we all seen the infamous video of spring break down in Florida, people not caring, saying, if I get corona, I get corona. I'm not going to let corona mess up my spring break. And it's like, yeah, it won't affect you, but you have to think about who you would be in contact with. Your parents, your grandparents, your friend who has asthma, any of your loved ones. And people are just not thinking at all. And what really pissed me off today was I was on my way home from work, and public transportation has slowed down because they're trying to, first of all, they have workers who are calling out. So I get on so the train pulls up and the train is crowded. And when I say crowded, I mean like kind of shoulder to shoulder. I took a picture of it and I put it on my Instagram. And it was just making me upset because it's not like this is a train full of workers. This is a train full of people who's just like, I want to go somewhere. Let me hop on the train. There were kids on this train. There were teenagers on this train. There was elderly people on this train. Of course, SEPTA, it was a homeless guy who decides to walk through the trains, pushing past people to ask for money or something to eat because he's homeless. No one was practicing social distancing. No one was, not caring that all it takes is for one person to have it and just sneeze on a train. Sneeze or cough on the train. Because I work in the bank, I work with money. I know how dirty money is. I'm generally a person that will wash my hands and not really touch my face as much because I know I can easily, get something and bring it home to my family. And I'm not trying to do that. So it just really pisses me off that people are walking around and they're not caring about their safety or the safety of others. So I'm hoping that wherever you live, that the coronavirus is being contained, that you are safe, especially for those who have to go to work. I work at a bank, but I know people who work in the medical field. My sister's a nurse, but she doesn't live in Philly. She lives she lives on the other side of Pennsylvania. And I know there are some people out there who work in the medical field, and it's just like, I can't imagine how stressful that is. I can only imagine. I can only go off of the stress that I'm going through. So, prayers out to those who still have to deal with this. Prayers out to everyone. And cause I don't want this to hit anyone. I would love for this to slow down so we can get back to normal life, but it doesn't seem like it's going to slow down. And I really hope it doesn't get to the point where they have to literally shut the city down and force people to stay inside. But it may come to that because society just doesn't know how to follow rules. It's just frustrating. On that note, I'm going to get into wrestling because despite of all that's going through, we had, two companies that try to put on a good show so that we can forget about it all. With WWE, very interesting with what they put out between Smackdown and Raw. First of all, Rob Gronkowski. No, I wasn't a fan of his really as far as football. I would like to say that I feel like he's a bit overrated. I get it, but I felt as though he was a bit overrated. I'm not a fan of Patriots anyway, so that may explain the way I feel. But what I don't like is how WWE tends to bring in these celebrities. I thought he was being signed to actually wrestle. I don't know if they're going to do that or not. They're bringing him in right now as a host for Wrestlemania 36, which obviously is going to result possibly in a match because I believe I think I heard he signed a 1-year deal, or it may be just a deal just to host WrestleMania. I could have sworn I read a 1-year deal. He comes out on SmackDown, and the most ridiculous, barely any rhythm to the music he was coming out on. He was trying to do this pelvic thrust to the ring post. I'm pretty sure that ring post felt very violated as my eyes were violated by it. And the thing was that really got to me, and you can say I'm really hating on the fact that he's in WWE, but the big thing that really annoyed me was when Elias was singing the song, and I guess he was supposed to be laughing, but the arena is so dead. We should be hearing him laughing, but he was obviously fake laughing. And I'm like, come on, dude. At least try. You have a friend who works in WWE. I mean, he may not be the best out there, but you at least have some type of insider information, tips, on how to do this thing. And it just really wasn't working. Come to AEW, which put on a phenomenal show, I have to say. And we get to Raw, and I noticed that Raw had a few changes. First of all, they fixed their hard cam. Their hard cam is now facing the Titantron, just like AEW is doing, which I think is a very good idea. And they took out the chairs that was around ringside, as if there was an audience or, a jury coming in to sit down, which is what AEW did. So I applaud WWE for looking at something and saying, you know what, that's a better idea. They didn't have anyone in the crowd like AEW did, but they definitely had guest commentators. They had the Street Profits on Raw. They had Asuka, which everyone kind of fell in love with. And they had Triple H, of course, but it really worked out for them. It worked out for them. The only thing that's a bit more annoying is that they continuously play full-on matches of past pay-per-view events. They did the Men's Royal Rumble, like I had said in the last episode. They aired Cena versus Bray Wyatt during Smackdown. And then during Raw, they did the Charlotte versus Asuka on Raw at Wrestlemania this past Monday. And I get it. I get, they want to do the social distancing. They really can't fly everyone out down to Florida. But I don't know, maybe at least give us something, or give us something, and I know they don't want to cancel their show, but my thinking is that this is an opportunity to bring in more viewers to your show on a given work night, school night, whatever, on Wednesdays. You at least have 1 million people watching wrestling between AEW Dynamite and NXT. And you have 2 million people watching Raw or Smackdown. And that's before all these shutdowns, especially with us in the Northeast. And I'm not quite sure where everywhere else that may have shutdowns, but that would bring more attention to your product, because there's not really much to do now especially on Friday nights. Nobody can go to the bars. Monday nights, Wednesday nights. So at least, say, let's take this opportunity to still put on a good show and to bring in viewers who never really gave our show a chance. Maybe it's people who have to work and may watch wrestling on YouTube, may watch the recaps, may read up on it, never really have a chance to see it live. And I applaud AEW for actually, doing the most that they can. It seems like they don't have their full roster there, of course, but they're working with what they have. And I understand with WWE, I kind of understand both sides. I understand that they're showing these past matches to kind of fill in the time because either, they don't have all the talent that's there, or they're really going to practice social distancing, which don't make much sense to me because someone mentioned it about AEW, that they're not practicing social distancing with the wrestlers that's in the crowd, especially with Jake the Snake out there. And I'm saying but you're ignoring the fact that there's people wrestling in the ring, That's as close of contact that you can get of not practicing social distancing. So I don't know if that's why WWE is airing these shows, that they really don't want to do too much. And I kind of understood it until the announcement came that Wrestlemania will now take place over the course of 2 nights, April 4th and April 5th. And I don't know if both nights is going to be 3 hours or 4 hours. I applaud WWE for doing this because I really hated the fact that they were making Mania 7-8 hours long. And by the end of the night, the crowd is tired, but there's no crowd this time. And then there's There is talks that this WrestleMania is going to be pre-taped as well, which if you follow me on Twitter and you go and try to spoil anything that's happening at WrestleMania, I'm going to mute you and probably block you as well, because this is WrestleMania. It's not like this is a Raw that's going on over in London or something, or even the Crown Jewel as well. This is WrestleMania, and I understand if they pre-tape it because they can't get everyone to come out. It's supposed to take place at the Performance Center again, which is a shame because we won't get the big pyro that we love to see at WrestleMania. It's, of course, the first night. They went over, I read of some matches that will take place on both of the nights. The first night will have the main event of John Cena and Bray Wyatt with Bayley's title on the line for that Saturday night. And then Sunday night, get it ready, because it's going to be Goldberg versus Roman Reigns for the true main event. Forget the other main event. And I always hated it when they would sit there and say it's 3 main events or whatever, or it's one of 3 main events. He said, no. The main event is the last match on the card. And the last match on the card for WrestleMania will be Goldberg versus Roman Reigns, where Roman Reigns will hold the title pretty high. And the closing shot, they may pop out pyro for him on this one. And I get what happened to him personally, and God bless him for surviving. But I am so tired of having to constantly repeat myself of Roman Reigns main eventing WrestleMania once again. Now, speaking of WrestleMania, I've been going through watching these past WrestleManias and a lot of good memories. Because now I'm up to the WrestleManias that I've been watching. What I had talked about last time with WrestleMania 1 through 9 and how I started watching WrestleMania at WrestleMania 9. And just going through all these WrestleManias is like bringing back such good memories. It really is. A few things that I forgot to mention for WrestleMania 10. That was actually the first Mania that featured the infamous WrestleMania song. If you haven't had a chance to check out that WrestleMania song, please do. I was in love with that WrestleMania song. And it had a video to it and everything. And it came from WrestleMania, the album. I thought it started at WrestleMania 11 until I watched WrestleMania 10 back again, and I realized it was in WrestleMania 10. Also, The Undertaker was not at WrestleMania 10, and that was because the Royal Rumble before that, Yokozuna had defeated The Undertaker at a casket match, and he opened up the urn. This was the first time that anyone has opened the urn, and there was a bunch of green smoke that came out that pretty much took out the spirit of The Undertaker. Put The Undertaker into a casket, him and like 20 other people. They locked it and rolled it out, and this was the first time that I've seen The Undertaker do any type of like mind games or magic tricks. And The Undertaker mentioned that soon all mankind will witness the rebirth of The Undertaker. I will not rest in peace. He appeared on the screen when he said all this from inside the casket. And then there was like lightning on the screen, and it turned to an outline of himself outside the casket, and the outline goes up to the top of the screen, and you see The Undertaker fly up to the sky. Of course, it wasn't actually him, but to 9-year-old me, that was about as real as it can get. Like, 9-year-old me would have told you that, yes, The Undertaker is an undead wizard that is out to take children's souls. That's how, and I was a fan of his. I know it's very confusing, but, so that's what happened to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 10. So there's a gap with the streak because he wasn't there. Now coming to WrestleMania 11. WrestleMania 11 was all about Lawrence Taylor going against Bam Bam Bigelow. We had the NFL versus the WWE. And there was a lot of celebrities with WrestleMania 11. We had Pamela Anderson, Jenny McCarthy, Salt and Pepper, Nicholas Turturro, and we had Jonathan Taylor Thomas, who I had the biggest crush on at this time, when he was doing Home Improvement and Lion King and all this other stuff. I had the biggest crush on him. Now, like I said, the big match for WrestleMania 11 was Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. And I didn't mention all the people who was on his team. And ironically, I wasn't really watching football that heavily, but I knew some of the names because my brother watched football. We had Steve McMichael, Reggie White, Carl Banks, Ricky Jackson, Chris Spielman, and Ken Norton Jr., who was on that team. Lawrence Taylor ended up winning this match. But we also had the Allied Powers, whose theme I actually liked. And that was Lex Luger and the British Bulldog going against the Blue Brothers. Razor Ramon with the 1-2-3 Kid. If you've never seen the 1-2-3 Kid, please YouTube it. You would never have guessed this was going to turn into X-Pac. We had The Undertaker going against King Kong Bundy. Wasn't really the biggest of fans for that match. Owen Hart versus Yokozuna going against Smoking Guns. But the real match that I wanted to point out is Bret Hart going against Bob Backlund for the I Quit match. And this had the special guest referee of Rowdy Piper. Now this match was a bit of a gem because it was not to be taken seriously. They tried to make it serious because it's Bret Hart, and he's the technician and stuff. But this match was mainly Rowdy Piper asking both competitors on the mic, "What do you say? Bob Backlund, what do you say?" I can't do this. I can't do the accent, but what do you say? And it's not like he had like a wireless microphone. This is 1994. 1995, I'm sorry. So this microphone was on a wire. Rowdy Piper had to like move the wire around and try to get like the best angle for them talking to it. And Bret Hart, you can kind of tell that he was getting a bit pissed off because he'll sit there and say no and hell no. In the end, Bob Backlund lost and he claimed to have seen the light. So, if you haven't never seen that match, go check it out. So now we are at WrestleMania 12. With this one had no celebrities, and the reason because of that was that Vince McMahon was upset that the buy rate for WrestleMania 11 really didn't do that much better than WrestleMania 10. And WrestleMania 11, like I said, it had the celebrities featured heavily, especially Pamela Anderson. And so Vince McMahon decided to have no celebrities for WrestleMania 12. So there was no one for this one. Now, my gem here is the Hollywood backlot brawl between Rowdy Piper and Goldust. Now, Rowdy Piper kind of called Goldust, I think, a fruitcake or something. He'll show him how to be a man and all this other stuff. Type of promo that you wouldn't hear today. If you've never seen this match, you'll see some footage that's a bit familiar. And they kind of, joke around that the footage looked familiar. And Rowdy Piper happened to jump into a white truck that resembles O.J. Simpson. So they replayed the exact same footage from the police chase from O.J. Simpson. But that was a fun match. Very weird ending. Rowdy Piper grabbed Goldust's nuts, and then he took off his zip up onesie basically. And Goldust was wearing a bra and a garter belt underneath with thigh highs. I believe it was thigh highs. And I just remember watching that and saying, what the hell is this? It was very confusing just for a 11-year-old to see. And then we had the Ultimate Warrior versus Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And this had one of his newest valets, who was Sable. And Mark Merrill was on the same pay-per-view as well. He was being introduced as the newest member of WWE or WWF at this time. Hunter Hearst Helmsley was going against the returning Ultimate Warrior. Now, at this time, I believe it was this, I think the rumor was going on at this time, or it wasn't, that the Ultimate Warrior that came back wasn't actually the original person who was the Ultimate Warrior. But seeing the Ultimate Warrior come back after having him introduce me to wrestling, it was a bittersweet moment. The Ultimate Warrior no-sold everything that Triple H did, and the match was over in 1 minute and 39 seconds. The other thing too was this had a match with Jake the Snake Roberts, Yokozuna, and Ahmed Johnson going against the British Bulldog, Owen Hart, and Vader. If you do not know who Ahmed Johnson is, Ahmed Johnson was the no-nonsense black wrestler that he seemed like he will slap the shit out of you if you say something out your mouth. If you follow Xavier Woods or Austin Creed on Twitter, he mentioned how WWE put out, how he put out pictures of their former champions on Instagram, and everyone was in their own gear, but Ahmed Johnson wore his cut off jean shorts and massive ass hammies, and was like, and he was like oiled up and all this other stuff. Like, I was a fan of Ahmed Johnson, I have to say. But be sure to check out these WrestleManias. You can check it out on the network if you are one of the people who haven't canceled their subscription yet in 2020. But that's what I've been doing. I've just been catching up on all the WrestleManias on the network. So going on to WrestleMania. Oh, another thing about WrestleMania 12. This was the WrestleMania. If you've seen all the footage of all the past WrestleManias, you see one where Shawn Michaels was on a zip line from the top of the top of the arena, which is something you'll never see again, of course, and going towards the crowd. This was the Iron Man match that he had against Bret Hart. And at this time, I was in love with Shawn Michaels. This is like one of the 2 times that I was like infatuated with a wrestler. I will not say who the second time is, but this is the biggest time, I would say. This was the biggest time where I was like straight up infatuated with a wrestler, like with Shawn Michaels. I created like this binder of cutout photos, and this is back when we had wrestling magazines and you had like the little, sort of like trading cards and everything. So I would collect a lot of things, and I have this binder that I had, and it was basically a photo album, and I had a full on section of Shawn Michaels. I have a VHS tape, homemade, of all of Shawn Michaels' matches and his promos and stuff. And in the same binder, I had a section for The Undertaker, I had a small section for Bret Hart, and then I forgot who the other section was. I think it was just mainly random, but that was the time that I was infatuated with Shawn Michaels during this time. Once he started getting to DX and he started doing that weird stuff, I fell off with him. But at WrestleMania 12, oh, I was in love with that man. But going on to WrestleMania 13, I believe Shawn had lost his smile at this point, and he was actually injured too, so he wasn't on this card. But the biggest thing for WrestleMania 13, this was the true birth of Stone Cold Steve Austin as the true fan favorite. Everyone talks about the King of the Ring when he said Austin 316 and everything, but at this WrestleMania, this where it really like kicked into high gear. This match was one of, I think this is the first time it was a double turn in a match. And come to find out, I watched Stone Cold's podcast with Bret Hart. If you haven't seen that yet, please go check it out. The stories that these two tell. I love the way that Stone Cold interviews people, because he goes there and he asks the questions that you want to be asked. But what I really like that Stone Cold does is that he lets the person tell the story. He doesn't interrupt them. He doesn't make the whole situation about him or anything like that. Like, you really get a true story that you would never have known. So with this match, it was the double turn between Bret Hart going from a face to a heel and Stone Cold going from a heel to a face. This also had Rocky Maivia, not The Rock, but Rocky Maivia, going against the Sultan, who actually is Rikishi, which I didn't know until maybe, 10, 20 years after that the Sultan was actually Rikishi, and Rikishi is actually Samoan and is actually The Rock's cousin. This featured, Rocky Johnson, who was The Rock's father. I think this was the same year that he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and he showed up to save his son. This also had This also had Ahmed Johnson and the Legion of Doom teaming up against the Nation of Domination. The Nation of Domination it wasn't a funny group, but it was a very interesting, I should say. It was a very interesting group because it really started off almost like Black Panther type of team, and then it just kind of like grew into, Nation of Farouk type of situation. It wasn't like a full on like Black Power type of thing. And then this was the WrestleMania that The Undertaker won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship, and you could tell that he was kind of like not really big emotional about it, but you could tell he was somewhat emotional about it because you see him point to the crowd and say thank you. And this was around time that he didn't have Paul Bearer with him. He was part of the Creatures of the Night. The Undertaker came out with his gray, his throwback gray gloves and boots on. Very bittersweet moment. With this WrestleMania, it wasn't a lot of celebrities with it as well, but we did have Ken Shamrock, who would eventually turn into a WWF wrestler, and he was actually the special guest referee for the submission match between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin. So going into WrestleMania 14, we had some celebrities with this one. We had Pete Rose, God bless him, who always gets attacked by Kane now. This was the WrestleMania. The biggest match was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels, who was in DX at this point. So, I wasn't infatuated with him like that anymore. If you hear a lot of like running around, that's my cat, of course, being crazy because she knows that her human wants it to be quiet because she's recording, but she decides that she's just going to go bat crazy. So this had Mike Tyson as the special outside enforcer, and then he came out front that he was the DX fan. And then this also had Jennifer Flowers too. So the big match for it, everyone always talks about Stone Cold Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels, and you have this shot of Mike Tyson pushing Stone Cold, and you have Jim Ross going Stone Cold, Stone Cold, Stone Cold. In the end, Stone Cold Steve Austin won the World Heavyweight Championship. I think this was his first heavyweight title, if I'm not mistaken. Of course, Mike Tyson turned on Shawn Michaels with NDX, and he ended up holding up an Austin 316 shirt. The big story here was The Undertaker going against Kane. The big story of that was that Kane happened to be The Undertaker's brother, long lost brother, that The Undertaker had tried to, who The Undertaker almost killed him in a fire that he set to the family home, I think it was. And Undertaker killed his parents and badly burned his brother Kane, which of course is a lie, because if you didn't really pay attention to that line, Kane eventually would start to, now Kane was fully covered when he first came out, and he had on a mask, and you realize slowly but surely he started to show one arm, then two arms, and then he was wearing the wrestling gear where you could see his back and his chest. And then, of course, he eventually took off the mask. And then that's when he returned into corporate Kane with the shirt off. And it's like, bro, where did you get burnt at? Cause there's not a lot of, you're not continuing very well with this story of Kane got badly burned by his brother Undertaker. But Undertaker had vowed not to face his younger brother Kane. Of course, Kane had locked the Undertaker into a casket, and they set the casket on fire. Now, at this point, I am 13 years old, but I still believe that the Undertaker was an undead wizard, because for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how the Undertaker was able to get out of that casket if it was locked, put in the middle of an arena where there's tens of thousands of fans sitting around, and it was set on fire, and when they opened it, he wasn't there. And then he started doing the mind games, stuff like that. And, yeah, you couldn't tell me that The Undertaker wasn't an undead wizard. I didn't at that point felt as though that he was coming after children's souls, because I was a little older, so I knew he wasn't coming after me. But I still was a bit freaked out about it. The other big match, too, was Mark Merrill and Sable going against the artist formerly known as Goldust and Luna Vachon. This was a period where Goldust was a bit, I can't even say weird. He just kind of went left field, I should say. Normally he does, the gold thing, and he goes, and a lot of weird stuff, but he definitely went left field once he teamed up with Luna Vachon. And this was the introduction of Sable really breaking out as more of a wrestler than just a valet and a pretty face. And her and Mark Merrill, who actually was married at that time, would team up, and Sable had started doing the Sable Bomb at this point. So yeah, and then this also featured Legion of Doom 2000 with Animal and the Hawk and Sunny as their new manager. And Sunny came out and something that a lot of 13 and 14-year-old boys really love to see. For WrestleMania 15, we had Pete Rose returning again. We had Boyz II Men, and we had Vinny Pazienza. Inzena? I butchered that. And, hey, you may wonder, why is Boyz II Men on there? Oh, that's because this WrestleMania took place in motherfucking Philadelphia. And I was 14 at the time, and I wanted to go to this WrestleMania. I really wanted to go to this WrestleMania, because I was like, oh man, finally WrestleMania is in Philadelphia. First Union Center, that it was called at the time. And, problem was, this girl was only 14 years old, wanting to go to a pay-per-view event that took place at night on a Sunday, I believe it was back then. And, tickets weren't really that expensive, but they weren't that cheap either. So I had to ask Mom, and Mom kind of said no. And I regret, and at that point, I was like, you know what? It's Philadelphia. It's gonna come back. And here I am 20 years later, and this bitch still hadn't come back to Philly. And so I kind of regret that decision since. Not really that I had control over it, but I definitely could have asked someone else to take me. And unfortunately, this was the time of my life where I didn't have friends who watch wrestling. It was just your girl watching wrestling by herself. Every single Monday night, every single, I don't know, I don't think Wrestlemania was out at this point. I mean, Smackdown was out at this point. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm not going to say Tuesday, Friday nights. But yeah, every Monday night, every Raw, every In Your House, every pay-per-view, I was watching. And I was the only person who I knew that really watched wrestling. I could have asked my brother to take me, and he probably would have took me, but I felt as though I could have definitely worked a little bit harder for this. And, I would have been able to see The Rock going against Stone Cold for the main event, no disqualification match for the WWF Championship with Mankind as special guest referee. I would like to have seen that in person. I would have loved to see The Undertaker at WrestleMania without losing, actually see him win at WrestleMania. That would have been cool. And the big thing that I wanted to point out with WrestleMania 15, if you had never heard it before, was the infamous Brawl for All match. I don't know whose idea it was to do this, but someone came up with an excellent idea that we're going to make wrestlers box, and that the main event of this tournament was going to be said wrestler who isn't a professional boxer going up against a professional boxer in Philadelphia. Now, of course, they probably figure, let's do it in Philadelphia, Rocky, they love Rocky, the movie and all that other stuff, so let's do it. And I remember watching this live. And I remember seeing Butterbean. Now, I didn't watch boxing like that. I knew Mike Tyson, of course. That's the only time we would watch boxing is when it was Mike Tyson coming on. So I didn't know who Butterbean was. But walking down that aisle, Butterbean, I was sitting there like, I don't know. I don't know about this one. But Bart Gunn was really good. Please watch the boxing matches leading up to this event. Bart Gunn was pretty good. He gotten a lot better. You could tell he really picked it up. And he was like, people were sitting there saying, second round, third round, all this other stuff. And, when we get to this event at WrestleMania, watching this back, I realized Bart Gunn only, he guarded the right side of his face. The problem is that his whole left side of the face was just wide open. And it's not like he was guarding the right side of his face by putting his hand in front of his face. It was more by his ear. Butterbean landed one good one to the left side, and Bart Gunn landed on all fours. And he kind of stayed there. This was first round, mind you. He kind of stayed there, and he got up at the count of 9, checked his gloves and everything. Bart Gunn was like, ready to go. And then, he goes up to Butterbean. He does a bit, tries to get in there. And Butterbean landed one. If you ever played UFC on PlayStation or Xbox, whatever, and you know how when you kick the person, you knock them out, they turn into, the knees get weak and they kind of like drop, TKO type of thing, like out cold type of situation. I mean, they turn limp. That is exactly what happened to our boy Bart Gunn. And it was a sad thing. Would you like to know how long this all happened? Oh, this all happened in 35 seconds. Yeah, this wasn't really a big thing. I mean, it wasn't a long thing. You thought you was going to see round 2. No. This all happened in 35 seconds. Our man was knocked out. I think they had to stretcher him out, but he was knocked the fuck out. Like, if you ever look in a dictionary to see what's the meaning of knock the fuck out, there'll be a picture of Bart Gunn on there. Now, this also had a match of Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart going against D'Lo Brown and Tess for the tag team championship. And this had Deborah, and I think Deborah was married to Stone Cold Steve Austin at this point. But Deborah was basically wearing a thong and a bra, and she had on it looks like a men's tuxedo jacket. And she did a nice turnaround. You can actually see that she was wearing a thong. And of course, Jerry King Lawler was on commentary, and he went absolutely batshit crazy. And this also had the Wrestlemania with Shane McMahon going against Tess. Shane McMahon with Tess going against X-Pac for the European Championship as well. I miss seeing Stone Cold and The Rock live and going against each other in person. And really thinking about it, I don't recall ever seeing The Rock wrestle in person, which is really sad because I live in Philly, and it has been a lot of Raw, Smackdowns, and pay-per-view events that have come to Philadelphia. And unfortunately for me, I only went to a live event once. I went to it In Your House. It was the debut of Mark Henry, and the main event for that match was Shawn Michaels going against Mankind. So yeah, never seen Stone Cold and The Rock wrestle live, which is a really sad thing. But it's okay. I'll be fine soon as WrestleMania comes back to Philadelphia. So now on to WrestleMania 16, or what everyone knows as WrestleMania 2000. The celebrities for this one is Pete Rose, Ice-T, Michael Clark Duncan. The main event for this match was this was all about the McMahons. So all four McMahons was going against each other, and they each had a representative for them. So for Stephanie McMahon, this was after the whole storyline of her and Tess was supposed to get married, and then Triple H revealed that he actually married Stephanie McMahon while she was passed out, which didn't make any sense to me because how did she sign the paperwork? But whatever. This had Triple H representing Stephanie McMahon Helmsley. He was champion. The Rock was representing Mr. McMahon. Mick Foley was representing Linda McMahon. And Big Show was representing Shane McMahon. We also had a 2-fall triple threat match for the WWF Intercontinental Championship and the European Championship between Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and Chris Benoit as well. And this also had, now the biggest thing that always cracks me up is that we had a tag team match between Big Boss Man and Bull Buchanan going against The Godfather and D'Lo Brown. And this was D'Lo Brown when he was teamed up with The Godfather, so he dressed up like a Godfather too. And he had Ice-T doing his entrance. And the funniest part is Ice-T was doing a rap and everything, and he sat there and shouted, "Grab your bitches!" I hollered when I first heard that. This also had the Hardcore Championship going on. There was a battle royal for the championship, and you can get pinned and pin other people as many times, but once the time expires, whoever is the champion at that time will retain the title. And this was back when we had Crash Holly going on. Taz was going after the title as well. So this is where the whole 24/7 title came from. It was the Hardcore Championship. Falls can happen anywhere. It was a 24-hour championship. So you had the people running around backstage, getting pinned, and it was very fun to watch, I have to say. And so for this event, we had, as much as I love that we had Molly Holly, we had Ivory, but unfortunately we had weird things, like a cat fight for example, for the women. And you would think that in order to win this match, it would have to be by pinfall or submission. No. That's too complicated. It's too complicated. The way to win this match is to throw your opponent outside the ring. What, you say? I'll repeat it again. Throw your opponent outside the ring. And this had Val Venus as a special guest referee. Now, I was 15 at the time, and so, it was Val Venus. If you don't know who Val Venus is, he was basically a porn star, and he would always make, these sexual behind jokes. I always thought that Val Venus was ugly in the face. He had a nice body, but he was just ugly in the face to me. But all these women was just swooning over him, and I really didn't get it. But this match had Terry Runnels, who is no longer with Goldust, who had the Fabulous Moolah with her, going against the Cat, who had Mae Young with her. Mae Young, God bless her, I loved Mae Young. And I love the Fabulous Moolah too. But Mae Young gave 0 Fs. She really did. I mean, she just did whatever. She had a lot of, the most famous one that a lot of people remember her for is her and Sexual Chocolate. And then people remember the fact that she got put through a table by, Bubba Dudley. God bless her. God bless her soul. This was also the first WrestleMania Access as well. And during the tag team match with the Godfather, when he came out with his hose, there's a woman one of them in the red takes a mighty fall. The camera kind of cuts a little bit after that, but you see her start to stumble. And I was very interested in where he get these women from, but, I think that's a question that really shouldn't be answered. So with this Terry Runnels and Cat match, there was a lot of nudity. The Cat basically wore see-through, and you see her bra and panties. I mean, that's basically what the women's matches were from here to, gosh, I can't even tell you. From here into maybe AJ Lee comes out about that time. Around that time of AJ Lee, we had basically bra and panties matches. We had evening gown matches. The matches were very basic. This match with Terry Runnels and the Cat was only 2 minutes and 26 seconds. That was it. You barely got 5-minute matches of these women. And it was mainly women who basic moves and just mainly bra and panties. Sorry to say. This also had the ladder match. Triple threat ladder match for the tag team championship. Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys. Now I've mentioned plenty of times about AEW that I love tag team wrestling. When it came to WWE around this time, tag team wrestling, chef's kiss. Tag team wrestling was so awesome back then. We had, like I said, Edge and Christian, we had the Dudley Boys, we had Hardy Boys. If that was too hardcore for you, you had Too Cool. If that wasn't enough, you had D-Generation X with the Road Dogg and, Billy Gunn. You had, you also had, you had Eddie Guerrero, you had Perry Saturn, you had a lot of tag teams back then. You had TNA, Albert and Tess. There was a lot of tag teams at this point. And tag team wrestling was very awesome. But what Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys brought to tag team wrestling was a whole new level. It was this crazy behind ladder match. And I may have these matches kind of go together because they had a TLC match. I think this was a TLC match, but they had a TLC match at SummerSlam. They had a match at WrestleMania, and then they had another match at, I think, the next WrestleMania. And it was just I think this was the one where it was a swanton bomb from the top of the ladder on down. I don't think this is the one with the spear off the spear to one of the Hardys, I think, dangling in the air. These 3 teams, they were psychotic, and I really loved it. So the next WrestleMania was WrestleMania 17 or WrestleMania X7, whichever one. This really didn't have a lot of celebrities. This had mainly Motorhead, but they were there to do, I think it was Triple H's entrance. Match for this. This had Chyna going against Ivory. Now, Chyna at this time, she was my favorite wrestler at that point. Unfortunately, she lost a lot of the muscle that she had when she was with Triple H. At this point, it was Stephanie McMahon and Triple H getting together. They were actually together at this point. And you probably should know the story that Chyna and Triple H were actually together first. And then, very close together, he broke up with her and got with Stephanie. And since that, it destroyed her. And at this point, she lost a lot of her muscle. And looking back at her match with this, you can clearly tell, like, she wasn't really, like, she was happy because she had a lot of support of the fans. The fans loved her at this point. But she won the women's championship, which I think is the first time she won the women's championship. She won the Intercontinental Championship before. And I think this was the first time she won the women's championship. I may be wrong. But she wasn't really even, like, very happy when she won. And a funny thing, if you go to check out this WrestleMania on the WWE Network, you'll see it'll say, for example, Chyna going against Chyna versus Ivory, Kane versus Raven versus Big Show. But for this WrestleMania, you will see on there, Kurt Angle competes in a singles match. Why, do you ask? Well, this is the match where he was going against Chris Benoit. I haven't seen the Dark Side of the Ring episode about Chris Benoit yet, but from what I'm hearing, it's a very good documentary, and it really goes into Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit's wife, Nancy, and I plan to check that out later on. Now, this WrestleMania had a TLC match for the Tag Team Championship, and this was the match where we had the spear. I think it was actually a Jeff Hardy, actually. It was the spear to Jeff Hardy. Jeff Hardy was hanging off of the titles that was suspended in the air. And Edge was crazy enough to do a spear onto Jeff Hardy, who both of them fell onto the ground below. Like I said, around this time, the tag teams was on point. We had the APA at this point. We had Right to Censor, which was, you wouldn't like, I really didn't like their entrance music, of course. But it was a bit cool. It was very interesting, because you had Val Venus, you had Ivory, you had the Good Father, not the Godfather, the Good Father as well, with Steven Richards. This also featured Eddie Guerrero going against Tess. We had Kane, who was going after the hardcore match. She actually won the hardcore title, the hardcore championship as well from this. He was showing a lot of skin at this point, but he still had on the mask. So, maybe he got skin, reconstructive surgery or something, but yeah. And then we had the gimmick battle royal for this Royal Rumble. And the gimmick battle royal really didn't last that long. It was only for 3 minutes. But this had Hillbilly Jim, Luke Williams, Butch Miller, Doink the Clown, Tugboat, The Goon, Earthquake, Brother Love, Michael Hayes, One Man Gang, Kamala, Repo Man, Sergeant Slaughter, the Gobbledygooker. But the Iron Sheik won this gimmick battle royal. It really wasn't, I don't think it was a trophy or anything with this either. And then this also featured Shane McMahon going against Miss McMahon. This was around the time where they had this very weird storyline where Vince mentioned that he wants to divorce Linda McMahon, and then Linda goes into some type of shock or something like that, and she turns into like this vegetable who had to be in a wheelchair and couldn't say nothing, react. She kind of like stared off into space like she was a vegetable or something. And so Vince McMahon decided to have an affair with Trish Stratus. True story. They would make out in front of Linda. God bless Linda to like be okay with it, cause Vince McMahon went to town kissing Trish Stratus, and he would fill up on her. And this was the storyline where he had Trish Stratus walking on her hands and knees, barking like a dog. I would never forget that, because that was just like, it made no sense to me. This WrestleMania was headlined by Stone Cold Steve Austin going against The Rock in a no disqualification match. And if I'm not mistaken, this is where Stone Cold, Steve Austin had decided to team up with Vince McMahon, and this made Stone Cold Steve Austin turn heel. That was a very weird decision done by WWE for Stone Cold and Vince McMahon to join forces. So now we're on to WrestleMania 18. This had Drowning Pool and Saliva. I wasn't really into Rock that hard at this time, so I had no idea who these two were. I think Drowning Pool was actually there to do Triple H's entrance, if I'm not mistaken, because he was the main event. He was going against Chris Jericho for the undisputed WWF Championship. Now this match had the infamous Icon versus Icon match of Hulk Hogan, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, I have to say, versus The Rock. And I was a fan of Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I wasn't a fan of the red and yellow Hulk Hogan, because I felt as though that was a bit of a fraud. This also had The Undertaker going against Ric Flair, and this was back when he was Biker Undertaker. He had the Limp Bizkit Rollin' theme music. And as much of an Undertaker fan I always found this American Badass or Biker Undertaker gimmick very weird, because I was so used to that undead wizard that he was. So for him to like act like so like gangster and like short hair and riding around on motorcycles, I was like, yo, this is the coolest mofo I've ever seen. But then I was like, but it's The Undertaker though. Like, why can't he shoot lightning from his fingertips like he used to? So it was very weird to see him like that. This also had Billy, now this also featured Billy and Chuck. At this point, WCW was mixed in with WWE. I don't think ECW was with them at this point. I don't think ECW was taken over yet. Let me see. This is WrestleMania 18. Yeah, ECW was starting to get overtaken at this point, because I think ECW folded in 2001. So this had the infamous Rock versus Hogan match, and the crowd was so into this match. It was amazing to see. I miss seeing crowds like that. That was just so hype. Everyone had a side. It was just like so deep into the Attitude Era. Now on to WrestleMania 19 that had Ashanti and Limp Bizkit, because we gotta do the Biker Taker entrance, y'all. Undertaker for this WrestleMania had one of my least favorite WrestleMania matches. And yes, this all includes Giant Gonzalez. This was The Undertaker going against the Big Show and A-Train for a 1-on-2 handicap match. This WrestleMania had featured the main event of Brock Lesnar going against Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. This also had The Rock going against Stone Cold again. This had Hulk Hogan going against Mr. McMahon in a street fight. We also had Team Angle going against Chris Benoit and Rhino versus Los Guerreros, which was Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero. Oh, what I exactly wrote down. But yeah, this WrestleMania didn't really have, the two celebrities that I mentioned, Ashanti and Limp Bizkit. Ashanti performed America the Beautiful, and Limp Bizkit only did the entrance for The Undertaker, which was kick-ass. This only featured Trish Stratus going against Victoria and Jazz, triple threat match for the Women's Championship. This was, the time for this match actually was the second shortest match. So, kudos to them. But this started to feature some of the WCW people, as you already know, since we had Hollywood Hulk Hogan and NWO. This was actually Booker T's first WrestleMania. And he was going against Triple H. Now, a lot of people felt as though Booker T lost this match. And a lot of people felt as though that Triple H kind of held Booker T back from having, really a successful run to become champion. And a lot of people always felt as though that this was due to Triple H and Ric Flair. Now at this point, I was kind of falling off, being able to catch up with a lot of the pay-per-view events because, I was at this point, once WrestleMania 19, especially between, 19, 20, 21, and 22, I wasn't really watching all the pay-per-view events because I wasn't really at my mom's house all the time. So at this period, it started to get a bit hazy. Now, I thought I stopped watching wrestling at this point because they took over ECW. And I actually did stop kind of watching it. I wasn't really keeping up with it all the time. So I remember seeing John Cena, but I didn't really watch John Cena like that. That was WrestleMania 19. So, going to WrestleMania 20. This was famously the WrestleMania. The Rock had already left. Stone Cold had left, but he actually came back to be the special guest referee for the infamous Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar match. This was just a singles match. Both men was on their way out the door. Goldberg didn't really care. I didn't care about it. And Brock Lesnar was going on to UFC. And neither man really wanted to wrestle. And so the crowd definitely crapped all over this match. The main event for this match was Chris Benoit going against Triple H and Shawn Michaels. A triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship. I didn't see how they worded this match on the WWE Network. I should really check that out now. I should really check it out so I can see. But this match, Chris Benoit won the title of this match. I have to think if at this time this was if this was after Eddie Guerrero had passed away. No, Eddie Guerrero didn't pass away in 2015, my bad. This was WrestleMania 20, which took place in 1994. This was a year before Eddie Guerrero had passed away. And Chris Benoit had won this match. Actually, I think Eddie Guerrero came out to congratulate Chris Benoit for winning this match. And I have respect for Chris Benoit. It was something about him that I wasn't fully on board with. But I always liked how much of a technical wrestler he was. I feel like technical wrestlers aren't really appreciated like they used to be. Okay, so they still didn't name him They titled that match Triple Threat Match World Heavyweight Title. But of course, they named everyone else. No, what am I talking about if this when Eddie Guerrero died? He's on the card. Duh, Jackie. He was going against Kurt Angle at this point. Duh. Alright, well, that was a dumb moment on my part. My bad. I thought that was the year that he had passed away, but I forgot when Chris Benoit won the title, I believe Eddie Guerrero came out to congratulate him. So for this match, the big thing was that this was the return of our undead wizard, The Undertaker. He was no longer, biker taker. He was no longer, the American badass. He was back to our guy with Paul Bearer. And he returned back to King, who at this point took off his mask and was only wearing his tights. He wasn't wearing a shirt. And he came back. He grew out his hair. Now, it wasn't fully long, but he still grew out his hair. He had the Druids with him. Previous to this, it was The Undertaker versus Mr. McMahon in a Buried Alive match. Only The Undertaker can lose Buried Alive matches because Undertaker is that always had that trick up his sleeve that he, comes out of the grave somehow. Kane interferes in the match, takes out The Undertaker, and uses he used something to put the dirt over the grave. This brought back our guy, the original, well, not the original version, but the Undertaker. This also featured a match of Victoria going against Molly Holly, hair for title match, and this is what caused Molly Holly to lose her hair and get her head shaved. We had Rikishi. We had a fatal 4-way for the WWE Tag Team match. We had Rikishi and Scotty 2 Hotty going against APA, the world's greatest tag team, which is Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, and the Basham Brothers, which was Danny and Doug. We also had, this is what really pissed me off. We had a Playboy evening gown match of Tori Wilson, Sable, Miss Jackie, and Stacy Keibler. I wasn't really the biggest fan of Tori Wilson. I thought she was very generic. But, whatever. She had the dimples and she wore bra and panties and was in the Playboy magazine. So people was all on her. But yeah, this was a evening gown match for 2 minutes and 40 seconds. This also featured John Cena going against the Big Show for the United States Championship. John Cena getting Big Show on his shoulders to do the attitude adjustment. I think that's what the move, the attitude adjustment. And he did it twice too. So, this was when he wasn't, squeaky clean, John Cena with the bright shirts and everything. No, this was Dr. Thugonomics, John Cena. He was like a hair off of being a heel at that point, as well. But the big thing, like I said, was Chris Benoit winning. We got The Undertaker back, and Goldberg and Brock Lesnar showing why no one really likes them to this day. So that is all for everything WrestleMania between WrestleMania 11 through 20. These years was WWE establishing themselves of not really relying on celebrities like they did before in WrestleManias 1 through 10. We had the Attitude Era going, we had the takeover at WCW, and we really started to bring out superstars out of this era. So next week I'm going to go through WrestleManias 11 through 30. This was when things kind of started to slide off a little bit, I have to say. We still had the women's matches not lasting more than 5 minutes. We started to slip into the PG era. And we also had the rise of CM Punk during this time as well. And then, of course, ECW was taking over at this point. And I could have sworn I wasn't watching but I wasn't up to date with it. Because I definitely remember always catching WrestleManias. But if you ask me certain pay-per-view events in between, it's a bit hazy, but I definitely remember WrestleManias because I would go to my mom's house to check out WrestleMania. So that's it for the WrestleBet podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Jaydee Talks. That's JAYDEE Talks. Be sure to follow the podcast at WrestleBread as well. And I just got an alert that an employee from Wawa has been tested positive for the coronavirus. So like I keep saying, please be safe. Let me know your thoughts of WrestleMania between WrestleMania 11 and 20. Let me know your thoughts on what's going on with WWE and AEW right now. Are you somewhat excited for WrestleMania 36? I mean, a lot of things is being canceled right now. Like I said, my birthday is the week of WrestleMania, April 9th. I'm thinking of maybe having a virtual birthday party or something. I don't know. But this is a very exciting time coming up. It's WrestleMania. It's my birthday. It's going to be the 1-year anniversary of WrestleBread. So a lot of things coming. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do as far as the 1-year anniversary, but I'll think of something, With everything that's going on, let's try our hardest to do something that puts a smile on our face. And that if, whenever you feel down, just hop on YouTube, hop on the network or something, and just watch a match or two that makes you smile, makes you laugh, whatever. Watch a match that made you fall in love with wrestling. And just for those couple of minutes, everything will seem right with the world again. Good luck. Please stay safe. Make sure you tell everyone you know to wash their hands, cough into their elbow. And let's try to get rid of this disease so we can all go back to normal and we can all go to, wrestling events. We can all cheer on our favorites. And I'm hoping that after all this, we all learn to just kind of cherish the little things. There are people out there who don't have jobs. There are people out there who's afraid to leave their house. And let's just start cherishing the little things. And I really appreciate you listening to this podcast. And be sure to check me out next week. Until then, guys, peace.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Check us out at WrestleBread.com and subscribe to WrestleBread on YouTube for more breaking news and JD's opinions.